And we'll start off with the stories making headlines this morning. It's all about fuel. And the Daily Nation has captured it extensively here. They say fuel lies. Backlash, they call it. The controversial cargo has triggered a criminal investigation that a substandard fuel consignment that the government ordered the importer to ship back a week ago had already been pumped into Kenya Pipeline Company's system and released to oil dealers. Now, the 60,000-ton petroleum hull has high levels of sulfur, over 4 times the permitted limited, and this is why it's called the substandard fuel. This story has been captured on page 4, and the CS for Energy, Wandayi, has also been quoted here. He says, One Petroleum Limited, the company that imported the said product and invoiced oil marketing companies, is directed to exit this product out of Kenya as soon as possible. And of course, the KPC acting managing director Pius Mwendwa on April 14 said, "We received a waiver letter from the CS Trade to allow the consignment into our systems. The fuel was allowed into the KPC system and later released to oil marketing companies." And of course, they're just saying that they will, go at a loss if at all they're not now going to have this fuel in the country. Of course, they were told that it should go back to where it came from. Lakini kirudi kwenye ilitoka, then they're going to also create losses as well for them. I don't know what you think about this.
Their loss is okay, fine. Of course, we have got to worry about that as a country. But then you don't compromise on quality, because
Yes.
what would that mean?
Yeah, because now we are saying it has high levels of sulfur, that is over 4 times the permitted limit, and they call it a substandard fuel. Well, this story has been captured extensively on page 4 of this newspaper. You can grab a copy of it today and take a look at what it says extensively, and how cooperative wasted 2 billion shillings in bogus land deals. That's another story on page 2 and 3. Matters politics given prominence on the front page as well. Ruto seeks to calm growing tensions with ODM allies. It says that President William Ruto has stepped in to forestall a looming fallout within the broad-based government by promising to rein in his lieutenants accused of plotting to shortchange ODM, and that's the story on page 6. There's a beautiful photo here of a basketballer, Madina Okot. She's a rising star in U.S. elite basketball. And this story is on page 31. I understand that she's one of the many women of Kenya. I think
she's Kenyan.
First.
We appreciate her big time. She's,
yes,
raised the flag so high.
Yeah.
We cannot fail to celebrate the greatness that she does. She's done this for 6 years. I remember listening to her, and she says, I didn't imagine that, 6 years down, I would get to this point. I think we have got to celebrate the fact that we have very many Kenyans that go abroad and they carry our flag high. Congratulations to Madina Okot, and we need to go out there and keep supporting her.
All right. She plays basketball or volleyball?
Basketball. She does basketball.
Right.
Yeah, she's basketball.
All right, that's the Daily Nation this morning.
Okay. Let's take the Standard newspaper. Interesting. Today, I don't know whether they have been forced to do more than one stories. That is on the front page. Of course, the fuel prices shocker. That is definitely a story that you will find across, and one that will be forming the basis of our conversation. Like we have said, it's a record fuel price surge, with diesel rising by 40 shillings and petrol 28.69 per litre. So we'll be getting to that conversation later, just to get to understand what our guests on the State of the Nation this morning have to say in relation to this record high. But that aside, we also have, a story. Well, of course, let's just talk about that one that has been extensively captured on page 9. But we also have the IMF, conversation right at the top strip, where they say stop lying. And the country's bid for an IMF bailout has hit a brick wall, with the IMF going ahead to warn of billions in hidden debt beneath official figures. This is interesting. The Kenyan officials in Washington, led by Treasury CS Mbadi, have embarrassingly been exposed as liars. You would want to understand this more. A story that has been captured on page 4. They constantly remind us that you do not need, or you do not want to fall in bad books when it comes to IMF and World Bank, and you just know how much they always come into caution. But at the same time, we have said that Africa needs to face away from all this dependency, because clearly such exposés are really not so good, and especially when they're implicating key official figures. So story that has been captured extensively on page 4. You need to know what exactly IMF thinks of these key figures and what implications then would run into the country's running of activities. Aside from that, on page 6, that is the front page, extensively covered on page 6, we have decades of legacy. They speak about the right Honorable Raila Odinga, may his soul rest in eternal peace, and they speak of 6 months in death, that it has taken 6 months for ODM and its leadership, that is to undo what its founding father Raila Odinga built over 5 decades. Of course, the once formidable party base is wobbling. As you can evidently see, they say the orange has been cut to 2. We have Linda Mwananchi and we also have Linda Ground. And like you have rightfully said, we have Linda Lela here. And as you have said, they say that President William Ruto is at the heart of making this house go to shambles. Whether it is true or not is also one thing that we'll be looking at later on. Those are the key stories that are captured right here, and many others that you would get down or inside the Standard newspaper. What else do you have, Taifa Leo?
Taifa Leo, mtu asiguse ndoa yetu, Ruto asema. That's the main story in the front page here. Wanaita
ndoa ya ODM na nani?
Ndoa yetu.
Yetu ni nani?
Broad-based. Yetu.
Yeah.
Sasa kauli ya rais inatokea wakati ambapo uvumi unaenea kuwa serikali jumuishi inayumba, ikielekea kusambaratika, huku cheche za maneno baina ya viongozi wa vyama vya ODM na UDA zikiendelea kutupwa. Ni habari katika ukurasa wa ndani za gazeti hili. UDA na ODM zitaendelea kushirikiana na wale wanaotumiwa kuzua mgawanyiko hawatafaulu. Ni Rais Ruto asema sasa ni ndoa ya UDA na vile vile ODM. Asisitiza ushirika wa UDA na ODM hautavunjika na kupuuza wanaotabiri kusambaratika kwake. And that's the main story there. The quick headlines here. Himizo Sifuna awe naibu wa Kalonzo mwaka 2027. Wabunge wa Wiper Pwani wapendekeza hivyo, huku Kalonzo akisema wako upande mmoja. Ni habari katika ukurasa wa 5 wa gazeti hili. Ruto atumia miradi kukabili Matiang'i. Ruto is actually in Gusii land. Rais atangaza miradi ya mabilioni ya pesa kushawishi wapiga kura wa Gusii kumuunga. He was there since yesterday, still there today. Vidokezo zaidi pia masuala ya spoti imezungumziwa hapo. Arsenal pema wakiwaalika Sporting UEFA. Kule juu kabisa, serikali kuwaruka wanavyuo vya kibinafsi. Wanafunzi wa vyuo vya kibinafsi sasa kukosa ufadhili, that is private universities. It's a story on page 3. I think this is an interesting read. Now what happens to students who are, who opt for private universities?
Right, universities.
Yeah, so you might not get funding. That's the story on page 3. Hofu mafuta machafu yakiuzwa nchini. Habari nyingine katika ukurasa wa 3, yabainika mafuta hatari kwa injini yaliingizwa katika mfumo wa usambazaji wa bidhaa hiyo. Taifa Leo. Let's take a look at the Star.
All right. The Star newspaper still speaks of our beautiful girl who's making us proud abroad. I think that is one of the stories that has been captured. She is the star of the Star this morning. And of course, as earlier mentioned, we have it on screen or we don't have it on screen, no problem. But anyway, the Star, we are talking about Madina Rokot. I think we have highlighted her story earlier on. But we also have, yes, another story that has been captured here. Kenyans hit as fuel price hike pushes up living cost. That is also a story that we have touched on and is extensively covered on page 2 of the Star newspaper. And right at the top strip, we have Boda Boda rider sentenced to life imprisonment for defiling 6-year-old girl. And these cases of child abuse are shooting up in the country. We really need to get our act together because we cannot, allow for these things to happen. Even though most of the cases are alleged, we also just just hope that, the wheels of the law could grind pretty much fast so that there's justice for victims. And then News Oburu calls crisis meeting as UDA ODM cracks widen. That is on the question of an ease, page 4 and 5. I think Taifa Leo peke yake tu ndio inaonyesha some level of confidence with the broad-based from the gentlemen themselves. But what we get to see out here is that there's some feel that these two parties are not in the best of space. And also that has been captured on page 4 and 5. That is what we have on the front page of the Star newspaper. They also highlight the US-Israel-Iran war that has affected the global supply on the question of fuel. We saw the prices heating up in different countries, and therefore we expected for it to hit home. Those are the key stories that is on the front page. Of course, if you'd want to get more details and what is captured therein, you can always grab a copy of that in the sports world. A goal title race twist, and of course I know you'll be getting a lot of sporting updates, especially now that we'll be having our sportsmen and women on ground, even as we look or keenly look on your behalf at the finals of the FIFA Women's this series, of course.
All right, People Daily, ODPP weak link in fight against crime and graft is a question they ask. That state's prosecutor comes under increased scrutiny over withdrawal or collapse of high-profile cases, particularly those involving corruptions. And the People Daily has captured this story on page 4. This is DPP Renson Ingonga. They call it an indictable apathy. That most withdrawals happened between 2023 and 2024, with 5 and 7 cases dropped, respectively. That among the cases that the DPP has lost include the recent acquittal of Trans Nzoia Governor George Natembeya, where the court also awarded him 2.5 million shillings in general damages. And also Aurora and Kimoroi dam scandal that involved former Treasury CS Henry Rotich, when the former CS and co-accused were acquitted, as the prosecution failed to call crucial witnesses. So the People Daily has made an analysis of this story here on page 4. Is the ODPP a weak link in fight against crime and graft? What do you think? Talk to us. On the top strip, NCIC facing questions over 250 million shillings irregular spending. That's another story captured on page 3. And Kan Wajir secure its water future beneath the dry horizon. It's another story on page 13 of the People Daily this morning. And that's the People Daily. Yes. Okay, quickly on the front page of the Business Daily before we get to what is regional and Odinga's transfer B Energy stake to offshore company. Family sees about 35% stake to farm in British Virgin Islands. And I think that is about the Odinga family and how they manage, of course, their very own wealth. Away from it, depositors is collapsed banks to get about 1 million in new rule, and that the bank depositors who lose money in failed banks will be paid up to 1 million in compensation if the Treasury approves a proposal to double the reimbursement, offering comfort to the worth savers. And I think this is a conversation we've had right here. We've had our very own team on ground with KDIC telling people you need not to get scared of banking. You just go ahead and bank because there'll be compensation in the event that there's worries about your money, which is a plus. Of course, they also talk about the fact that Kenyatta National Hospital nurses are again in fresh protest. Contrary, well, at least we also saw a release by the Ministry of Health yesterday to say that, the planned strikes are not going to happen because conversations are ongoing. So I think this is stories to look out for that are captured on the front page of the Business Daily. Tuvuke border and we start in Uganda. The new vision, government secures more fuel to avoid crisis. Plan reveals how long the fuel will last Uganda. That's your story on page 3. I don't want to hear about corruption in Parliament, Museveni tells MPs elect. It's another story on the front page here. Gaba daycare murder, caretaker gives chilling testimony. And that's the new vision. We take a look at the Daily Monitor now. Campaign bruised MPs get 100 million shillings relief each. They call it a financial aid. That president says the 40 billion shillings partially handed to 400 MPs will tether the 9-day NRM retreat in Kwanzi will help the largely financially strapped legislators during their swearing in and handling subsequent matters. That's Uganda. Okay, let's cross over to Tanzania.
We start off with the Citizen. And he speaks about a report that, is about the growth of Tanzania, and largely on the question of how the different sectors that actually get to lead the nation, and the mining as well as quarrying continue to dominate Tanzania's foreign direct investment, as highlighted there. This is, of course, out of the report that speaks of how, the country is functioning and the different sectors that, carry the day. And as you can evidently see, they say these are the sectors that continue to boost the growth of the country vis-a-vis what is happening in the global stage. But that aside, we need to grace Zanzibar edition of Rising Woman Initiative today. That is a story that has been captured on page 3 of the Citizen in Tanzania, where President of Zanzibar, Hussein Ali Mwinyi, is today expected to grace this edition. And of course, this is in celebration of their girls. On the other side, Rostman Taifa Gas takes over Songo natural gas project after Okra exit. This is quite interesting. That, of course, there's always that takeover of key sectors by different tycoons. We also have a different paper, Wananchi, Kigwangala anazungumzia maisha bila cheo, I think reminding us just how critical it is that power is transient. Today you are in power, everybody's listening to you, but before you know it, when you're out of it, it's a whole different thing. So nafikiri it's a story that you want to look out for, so that it reminds you how to stay humble. Madaktari bingwa wa ubongo tatizo, that is on the top strip and extended or captured extensively on page 8 of the Wananchi. I think there are very many stories, but time would not allow us to go into all that. Kwa hiyo tuyaachie hapo, you can grab a copy.
All right, let's cross over now to Nyayo National Stadium.